Hello, hello, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and I don't even know how to describe that game last night. We'll get into it here in the first segment. We have midseason grades for the Pittsburgh Penguins coming up later in the show, but to start with that game, a 5-4 overtime loss to the Ottawa Senators in the nation's capital, of course, Canada's nation's capital, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. It just felt like a game that if they would have won, it would have been great, but I don't know how much they deserve to win that game.
Join the bandwagon of don't deserve to win games. Listen, I was angry at them with the Anaheim Ducks game, and I'm not that much happier after this one. These are beatable teams, guys. I don't care how injured this lineup is. I don't care if it is our backup goalie. These are, especially the Ducks, and you know what, looking at it, and Ottawa, they only had 19 wins heading into the game, are beatable teams, especially whenever you consider, there's injuries. Well, the top six is still in place, and neither team has great goaltending this year. And we saw the not good goaltending against Ottawa. Cam Talbot couldn't catch anything. He couldn't hold on to any puck that hit his glove. It flew through, and we weren't taking advantage of that, especially against Cam Talbot in Ottawa. 19 shots in the entire game. 19 shots isn't good enough. 19 shots isn't good enough through half of the game, really. Maybe you want it to be a little higher. Maybe it's about where it should be. You played the full 60 minutes and 25 seconds and only got 19 shots on goal. I'll give them, okay, fine. They got their shots off against Anaheim. That's great. And credit to John Gibson, he played pretty well. I expect more from this team regardless on both sides of the puck in both games. And I'm a little upset with this team. And I texted you after that Ducks game, during the Ducks game. They haven't even gotten to overtime yet. And I texted you, my sixth place ranking during the power rankings was generous. This team eats it right now. And they need help at the bottom six, and they need those injuries to come back to at least help.
I get where you're coming from with saying that was generous. I laughed at that a little bit because, if you put them lower than sixth place, that means you'd be placing the Flyers and the Columbus Blue Jackets ahead of them, which I don't know if I'd be willing to do that at all this season, no matter how bad it got for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But last night was a tough loss. The Monday game, I tried to come out of it feeling positive. They got the 2 points. They bounced back into a playoff spot with games in hand. They got some good news on the injury front, which is still a positive for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that loss last night was a tough pill to swallow for the Pittsburgh Penguins here in January, which has really just been a tough month for this team. So they need to get to February in a bad way. But the one player I think that has thrived this month, and I want to talk about him a little bit here, is Jason Zucker. Because Jason Zucker is, heating up is an understatement. He is feeling it right now. 4 goals in his last 6 games. He's upping the physicality, it seems, every single game. He's always the Subway sandwich of the game, and they're getting progressively harder as far as how hard he's hitting people. He's making it hard for me, Horwat, to imagine the Penguins not signing him, but who knows at this point? It's just a matter of the fact that he is probably the Penguins' most consistent player when it comes to effort night in and night out. It's been that way for a while, but you're really seeing it become evident here in the past couple of games.
You are. You are. And he is one of the most important pieces to this machine right now. I think he's played phenomenally well, more than just being physical and more than just scoring goals. It's great that he's doing this after the last 2 seasons that he's had. He's doing it in a contract here. Sure, his contract might not look like a 6-year deal just for sake of hard miles. But I think a new deal here has got to be guaranteed at this point. He's done everything he can to prove that he's still worth it. And that's all we could have really hoped for.
I don't know if a new deal is guaranteed, but I will say the desire for a new deal should be. Like
Exactly,
the desire on the Penguins' part, 100% should be. Now, whether or not they can pull that off, because he might be pricing himself out of Pittsburgh. Like that might be a thing. Right now, he's making $5.5 million. he's playing at a level where, yeah, maybe he shouldn't deserve $5.5 million, but right now it's going to be hard to take money away from him the way he's performing for the Penguins.
Yeah, you're right, but I'm still just going to have to draw comparisons to the deals that Hextall signed this past offseason, and Brian Rust and Rickard Rakell. Now, like I said, they both got 6-year deals. I don't think Jason Zucker's getting 6, and that's just because of his hard miles. But Zucker making 5.5, without looking at numbers, I just feel like at this point in their careers, Zucker's not the guy you pay more than, especially Rakell. I feel he's played over that 5.0 clean rate. Maybe Zucker gets a $5 million. Maybe it's I doubt you get him down to 4.5. So it probably starts with a 5, and then you go from there. So maybe he gets a 5.5, 5.25. It's going to coast around the Rakell and Russ numbers, and we have you say he might be pricing himself out. The Penguins have $10 million coming off of the books in their forwards alone. Now that could just be because there's a ton of names thrown onto this list here because of John Gruden being involved, Drew O'Connor still being on the NHL lineup. There's a good chunk of change that's going to be lifted off of the cap this upcoming summer for the Penguins, though. So they have that to help them along. It's just a matter of who they want to keep around.
Yeah, they have a lot of money coming off the books, but let's not forget they have a lot of guys that they're going to need to pay. Tristan Jarry being one of them. Ty Smith is going to need a new deal. Teddy Bluger, if the Penguins want to keep him around, is going to need a new deal. I feel like there's a couple other names that I'm missing. Maybe not top 6 guys, which means it's not the bulk contracts other than a Jason Zucker. But there's going to be a lot of holes to fill for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that's something we'll get to later in the season. But I do want to shift gears here a little bit, and I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins penalty kill. I tweeted out a question to you and a couple of our other friends of the show last night and said, how worried are you about the Pittsburgh Penguins penalty kill right now? Because last night, obviously not good enough, giving up 4 power play goals to the Sens in a game where you lose 5-4. Not great, Bob, especially when you give up 9 chances. And I know I'm not happy about it. Horwat, you're not happy about it. And Mike Sullivan, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, is certainly not happy about the officiating that we saw last night or the performance of the penalty kill. Here is Mike Sullivan post-game on his thoughts on that loss to the Ottawa Senators.
Is it even possible to gauge your team's performance when you're in the box that often in one night?
It's pretty tough to assess a game like that when half the game is special teams. There was no flow to it. There was no 5-on-5. It was ridiculous.
What contributed to that? Was it guys missing calls, the other team making the calls easy on them?
I don't even have an answer for you. I don't have an answer for you.
Was there lack of discipline from your team at all tonight? Was that an issue for you at any point?
Let's just say I questioned a fair amount of the calls.
What can you say about the effort that you guys showed, particularly on the PK, being out there all night, basically?
Well, we battled hard, but we didn't get it done. We gave up 4 goals against. It's not good enough. We battled hard, but when you're spending a third of the game trying to kill penalties, it puts an awful lot of burden on those guys.
I think it's safe to say that Mike Sullivan wasn't too pleased with the officiating. Is that safe to assume, Horwat, do you think?
You could say that. The silence spoke volumes for one of those questions in there. The fact that he only answered 4 questions kind of gets in there. I mean, maybe that's because they had a quick flight out. I'm assuming they did. They were supposed to practice today. Not doing that. That makes me feel nice and rested as well. Yeah, they had a quick flight out, so maybe that also had something to do with only 4 questions. But you figure 4 questions and 3 of them are pretty much about the officiating and your team's lack of discipline. Which, by the way, also, yeah, there was a lot of calls, and yeah, a lot of it can be put on the officiating. But also, you're taking 9 penalties. That's not good, and not even 9 penalties, but some of them in there were 2 more tacked on for an unsportsmanlike, a double minor for a high sticking. which, by the way, in Brian Rust's defense, it was Tim Stutzla. That dude has created a pretty good trend or notoriety across the league as being someone who dives. So he may have been onto something. That being said, yeah, Sullivan was not happy. And it was very evident. There was the video of him golf clapping the officials.
I loved it. I loved it so much.
I'm in the middle of the second period watching the game, thinking to myself, earn your $10,000 fine, Sullivan. Just get it out. Earn it. And we don't know if he got anything like that yet. We don't know exactly what was said. We don't know what had happened. But regardless, this isn't the first time Sullivan's been mad at officials this year, by the way. So, but this one was a little atrocious, and the words in there spoke for it. The silence in there spoke for it. He used ridiculous, and how he had to again discuss that there was no flow to the game because there was no 5-on-5 play because they turned it into a ref show.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous.
And we've seen that a couple of times this season. We've seen that a couple of times this month already, where the referees just take over the game. And let's not lie about it. NHL referees are the biggest mental midgets on the planet because you can't yell at them for 2 seconds without them getting butthurt and then making a stupid call that costs your team right after it. It happens across the board in the National Hockey League. It's not just against the Penguins. It happens all the time because, I mean, to be fair, who wants to be a referee in this league anymore? Nobody. Because the track record is so bad that the second you get on the ice with those stripes on, there's going to be people that think a certain way about you, but that they've earned that. And Mike Sullivan was not happy about it. And what I will say is this: 9 penalties were bad. The worst one, in my opinion, was the roughing call on Mark Friedman, just because he hit Alex DeBrincat and like laughed at him when he went down. Mark Friedman is a menace. I love him. And then the "are you not entertained" when he scored a goal was great. But that penalty just shows right there. It's like, what are we doing? Are we playing like patty cake or are we playing hockey? He knocked him down. Yes, it got a little bit rough. I'm sure every player that played in the early 2000s or in the 90s or the 80s looked at that and said, I don't know if I can watch this sport anymore, because that is a horrendous penalty call. And that's what I mean by when I say ref show. The trippings, yes. The hookings, yes. Sometimes those stick infraction calls are hard to miss, especially like a high stick. But
yeah,
a roughing like that and an unsportsmanlike conduct, that's the calls that you just look at it and you say, are we playing a sport here, or are we sitting there and trying to hand out, be fair to everyone, be kind to everybody on this ice? No, it's a sport. It gets heated. There's a reason that fighting has been legal in this sport until freaking the 30s, because people can bare knuckle box on the ice. Just those calls agitate me. But at the end of the day, you have to kill the penalties. Like, you have to be better than giving up 4. And Sullivan ended his press conference with that. The Pittsburgh Penguins penalty kill right now, 71.4 success rate in January, which is 28th in the National Hockey League. They have had to kill 3 or more penalties in 5 of the 8 games that they've played this month, but they have just not been able to step up to the bat. Part of that might be no Tristan Jarry. Part of that might be missing Pettersson, Letang, Petrie, and Ruda for different periods of time. But you still need to have better results if you're the Penguins penalty kill.
Have you looked at where they stand, the penalty kill stands amongst the league?
Overall, no, I haven't.
Okay, then I will just ask you. They entered the game against Anaheim, I believe it was 2nd in the NHL. They had risen from the ashes, right? They went up to 2nd. In the last 2 games, where do you think they have slipped to?
I have no clue. Probably like 10th or 11th.
Well, I'm generous. No, they're 7th now. But that's still a 5-point drop in 2 games. You now sit at 81.51%, 7th, real close to being 8th behind Ottawa of all teams. And that's not good enough. Regardless of who's on the ice and you do have to kill those off. Some of those penalties were absolutely questionable. You said the Friedman one. I'm going to say the P.O. Joseph one.
Yeah, that one was bad too.
That one was terrible. And I think that's the one that kind of sparked Sullivan's golf clap following the obvious too many men on the ice for Ottawa. You have to kill those, though. You're right. You're given that opportunity. And for a team like the Penguins, who the last few seasons have had top 3 penalty kills, top 3 in the NHL, you'd think, okay, they're going to take 9. Maybe they give up 1 or 2. because it's just, odds. No, they shouldn't be giving up every goal in regulation. They don't give up those goals. This is a completely different ballgame we're talking about. We're coming out of here saying the penalty kill looks great. Maybe we're discussing that the power play needs some work, because it still does, but it's getting there. We're having a completely different discussion of this game, and I mean that's obvious because 4 goals wouldn't have gotten scored that way.
Yeah. Yeah, when it comes to the penalty kill, I am a little concerned, but part of that is I want to see what it looks like when Tristan Jarry's back between the pipes. We'll get to Casey DeSmith's performance when we do our midseason grades. Obviously, I have seriously varying opinions on coin flip Casey, so we'll talk about him a little bit later in this episode. But the Penguins penalty kill just needs to be better. You need to be flat out better. You can't put them in that position. But at the same time, you need to step up to the challenge when that happens, because it's going to happen in this league. Refs are mental midgets. They can't handle the stress. They can't handle making the correct calls day in and day out. It's not going to happen. It doesn't happen in the NHL. It doesn't happen in the NFL. It doesn't happen in the NBA. Freaking the MLB is probably going to have robot umpires by 2025, just completely automated. So it's human error. It's part of the game. You just have to adapt to it, unfortunately. And the Penguins, I'm not going to say they got the worst of it, because they were getting some calls as well. I think one of the Malkin trips was, I don't know what you want to do. It looked coincidental to me, but at the same time, you can't give up 4 on 9. I know it's tough to do. I know, especially when you have 2 double minors, which in my opinion are just as difficult to kill off as a 5-on-3, because you're out there for just so much longer. And even if you give up a goal, you're out there for another 2 minutes regardless. And you really have to empty the tank of your penalty killers in those instances a little bit more. But, the Penguins, at the end of the day, once they get those guys back, if they can turn it around, then you can look back on this and say, yeah, they were missing the guys. But in the moment right now, you just need to step up and be better than what they've been showing.
Yeah, you're all capable of playing in the NHL. Has to be better than that. And you're statistically, on paper, all better than what the Ottawa Senators and the Anaheim Ducks throw at you.
Yeah.
Going to overtime against those 2 teams, fine, you pulled out a win against one of them, but neither game should have gone to overtime. I'll give them credit because they put up damn near 50 shots on Whitehall's zone. Did you know John Gibson's from Pittsburgh? They put up 50 shots on John Gibson. And like I said, to his credit, played a pretty solid game. He was making some pretty good saves. But you didn't give Cam Talbot enough pressure.
No.
It's doesn't matter who's in the lineup. You get shots on goal. And also, we don't need to discuss it, but boy, oh boy, only playing John Gruden for 3 minutes. Ooh.
That's something. I mean, we can get into it later, but that's something that I don't fully put on Mike Sullivan, considering the game and the way that it had gone. Like, if your team's only going to play 30 minutes of 5-on-5 time, how long are you sincerely going to put out the 4th line?
I understand that, but it's the fact that he was the only player under 10 on the lineup.
Well, also because the players he plays with play penalty kill, and they were out
so
there.
Does he. That's one of the things that Sullivan said whenever he came in here, is that John Gruden also kills penalties.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Just saying. I don't know. Because if he was going to hold John Gruden on the bench for a lot of the game, he should have held other players too. Drew O'Connor, Kasperi Kapanen. Been singing their praises recently, but they got over 10 minutes. Anyway, I digress. A lot going on with this team. It's all very confusing, and it all needs to get fixed soon. Heck, I'll pick up the phone.
Yeah, it was an interesting decision. Definitely something that needs to be looked into further. But at first glance, I was just like, it's like he said on that clip that we played, it's tough to assess a game when you don't play any 5-on-5 time. And if you play that little of 5-on-5 time, there's no time to really play that 4 lines over the boards like the Pittsburgh Penguins are supposed to be doing, although I don't think they have the talent to be able to do that right now. But that, again, is a discussion for another day. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Penguins mid-season grades. We'll get into most of the Pittsburgh Penguins here on this episode of The Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat. We're going to do our mid-season grades because late last week, I believe Friday was the actual game that tipped the scales from first half to back half, and now we need to give a little bit of grading because, Horwat, you graded Ron Hextall in his first 100 wins as Pittsburgh Penguins general manager. We won't get into that right now because we talked heavily about Hextall. I believe it was either Monday or last Thursday. So go back and check out that episode on the feed. You can check out many episodes that are on the feed with many different topics surrounding the Pittsburgh Penguins. But let's get into the Penguins midseason grades. We're not going to go into all the players on the team, but I think we have a nice list here of 10 or 11 players that we're going to talk about. And I want to start with Bryan Rust. Horwat, my opinion on Bryan Rust is that he has underperformed this season overall. I would give him a C grade, but that's with looking at the fact that he still has 10 goals on the season. He still has 27 points on the season, which is not horrible, but it's less than we've come to expect from Bryan Rust. And he had that long scoring drought, which affects my grading. And he just, to me, hasn't been as decisive with the puck as I'd like to see and as much as he was in seasons past. So my grade for Bryan Rust is a C.
I can agree with it with a C. I'm going to go B- though, because yes, he has had that scoring drought, and yeah, he's definitely underperformed this season compared to what he should have been at. But every goal he does score seems to be a big, important goal. I don't know what it is. It seems every time you see Bryan Rust knock one in, it's all right. There's a momentum swing there. There's something changing with the game now. So I'll give him that credit to say he's a -10. Which is good for second worst on the team. But he's trending to at least score the important goals that the team needs. He's the one that's getting flip-flopped between Crosby and Malkin. He and Raquel have been doing that dance all season. So I think once he finds a home, maybe things pick up a little more. And I think his home's going to end up being on the first line. That's fine. So be it. Raquel's going to play great anywhere. And I think we can just accept that and move on. But I'd go B-. Yeah, he hasn't been the same, but he's scoring important ones.
The last thing I'll say on Bryan Rust is I just feel like he's more of a non-factor on the power play. I know he was taken off of that unit, and that might be why his counting stats aren't as impressive as they have been in the past couple of seasons, but it was warranted. That's the thing. Like
he's come up huge on the penalty kill though. On
he has. So. Yeah. But I just really think that Bryan Rust, I need to see more consistency from him because even when he wasn't scoring in seasons past, the reason that everybody was so excited that he got that new contract is because he plays physical. He can play any style that you want him to play, and he makes a difference in games even if he's not scoring. I just haven't seen that element as much this season as I'd like to.
Yeah, that's fair.
So let's move over to Jake Guentzel, somebody who often plays opposite of Bryan Rust. Guentzel, 40 games played this year, 18 goals, 39 points. Horwat, how do you grade Jake the Snake Guentzel?
We'll toss a B+ his way. He's done very well. Obviously, he's not on the same scoring pace as we all would have liked, but he's finding goals here and there. He's getting the right areas, and we know he's not going to leave Sidney Crosby's wing. Pretty status quo almost, if not even a little under for Jake Guentzel because we expect a bit more of a pace. He took 7 or 8 games off without a goal and without a 5-on-5 goal for much longer. So, yeah, I think B to B+ is a fair rating. We're happy to see 39 points in 40 games. It's almost a point per game player. He'll probably get to it soon enough. And, yeah, it's solid. Nothing too negative to write home about.
Yeah, Guentzel's quietly putting together another good season. When I say quietly, I mean like church mouse quietly putting together another good season. He's had his fair share of struggles, though. No 5-on-5 goals between November 29th and January 8th. That's the big thing for me that really takes away from his grade. But I also give him a B+ because you can say that he's not on the pace that we'd like to see him, but he's on an 82-game pace of still 36 goals, 37 goals. If you're going to get a 35-goal scorer out of Jake Guentzel, how are you going to complain about that? So he's still, and a point per game. So he's still producing. He's still doing a good job. But again, similar to Bryan Rust, he's just not having the big moment. You said Bryan Rust is scoring only basically exclusively like important goals for the Penguins. It seems like Jake Guentzel not only has he scored a lot of empty net goals this year, but it just seems like he hasn't scored that big goal up until Monday, where he scores the overtime winner for the Pittsburgh Penguins, where he comes down, he makes the shot, he plays decisively, and he says, I'm going to end this call game right now. That's something that we've seen in the past from Jake Gensel that I think has tapered off a bit this season. But when you look at the numbers, they don't lie. He's having a good year. But again, as quiet as a church mouse, he's going out there and producing how he can. He did have that stretch where he struggled, though, and that is going to hurt him. Chris Letang's a tough player to grade at this point of the season. He's had, obviously, a tough year off the ice, especially in the past few months. Trying to keep the grade on the ice, Horwat, and his on-ice performance, which we all understand that everything that's happened off the ice does affect what happens on the ice. They're humans before they're players. But trying to keep his grade to being on the ice, what do you think Chris Letang is midway through the season?
I'm going to go with a C. Just hasn't been perfect. Hasn't been terrible. I mean, is he still? He is still leading defenseman in scoring on this team because we're getting no points from the blue line, and that's a whole nother issue to dig into a different day. But yeah, I just think that's the safe bet. He's the -12. He is leading the team in the plus, or leading the team in minuses, I guess. The green jacket, if you will. It's not ideal, but at the same time, it's hard to judge coming out of so many off-ice issues that I think you really just have to take everything he did up until his second stroke as part of this. Everything after, I mean, sure, you could say his comeback was fun. In fact, he got a couple points afterwards, but everything up until then was kind of just a C rating. It was fine. It may not have been passable for first-line defense, but one of the other redeeming qualities is, and I've seen a lot of people say this, we see how broken this team is without him, right? This defense is without him. Maybe that bumps his grade up a little. Maybe we come back to this grading in, he's considered day-to-day. Maybe we come back to this grading next week and we're like, hey, all of a sudden, we see what he does to this defense as a whole. He deserves a higher grade. But for now, it's got to be a C.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little higher than you on this one, actually. I gave him a C+. He struggled a lot early on. When I mean struggled, he struggled a lot. But he was also strapped to Brian Dumoulin when the Penguins were still trying to pass Brian Dumoulin off as a top-line defenseman. He's not, and he hasn't been all season, and he's not going to be ever again. So strapping Letang to him did hurt Letang overall, but he still didn't seem right alongside Marcus Pettersson. Now, that is an adjustment. That's a different type of player. And he didn't seem right alongside P.O. Joseph, but again, different type of player. But it really feels like he just never got his game going. And then, of course, everything that happened from November 28th on is something in its own right, as you mentioned. But before that, it just didn't seem like he could get his feet underneath him this season. I expect to see a really good second half from him. I think when he does return to the ice, obviously he's practicing with the team right now. When he returns to gameplay, I don't know why. It might be a gut feeling. It might be the narrative-based feeling, but it feels like Chris Letang is going to go on a run to end this season that's going to get people to say, okay, you know what? Forget the first half. This is what Chris Letang is, and this is why he was signed to a 6-year extension, even though he's at the age of 35 right now, because he still remains the best defenseman on the Pittsburgh Penguins team when it comes to just pure talent, pure ability, and what he can be at his peak. He just hasn't been anywhere near that so far this season. So C+ is my grading. C is your grading. Obviously not what you want to see from your top defenseman, but something that I expect to see better in the second half. And I think he's earned that at least based on his past history.
Absolutely.
So another top defenseman. I don't know what's going on over there, Horwat. Somebody's emptying a dumpster, maybe. Is it trash day over there in Robinson?
No, I love living in an apartment where people are moving constantly.
Fair enough. That happens literally and everywhere. It's annoying.
Yeah.
Jeff Petrie, let's move over to him. I give him an A-. First year with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think it took him a minute to get acclimated, and I think that was expected. But he was playing absolutely phenomenal hockey before his injury on December 10th. His absence has been sorely felt on the Penguins blue line, and I think when you see him return, you'll realize the same thing that you were talking about with Letang. Once Petrie returns, you will see the level that the Pittsburgh Penguins defense jumps just from getting him back in the lineup.
I agree with you there. I think I would go B+. It's just Still a little new. He's been suffering from that injury for a long time now. We don't know what he would have done to positively or negatively affect this most recent stretch of struggling play, especially on the power play too. We bumped him to the first power play over Letang on a couple of occasions to try and jumpstart something there. So I think B+ is a fair assessment. Too new still, still trying to get past his upper body injury. So I think he'll definitely help this defense whenever he comes back and should be able to really, stabilize something. He's a big presence on that line. So we'll see what happens.
Let's move over to Marcus Pettersson, and then we're going to take a quick break after this, and we'll get to some other players after the break, including Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, both goaltenders, and Jeff Carter, and a couple other guys. But Marcus Pettersson, to finish off this segment, I'm going to tell you right now, Horwat, this is the only A+ I've given to this entire team. Marcus Pettersson, to me, is the best defenseman on the Pittsburgh Penguins this season. You could tell the impact that he had when he returned on Monday against the Anaheim Ducks, immediately saved probably 2 or 3 goals, and he did the same thing against the Ottawa Senators last night. He's leading all Penguins defensemen in total time on ice, and he only trails Ty Smith, who's only played 9 games in expected goals at 5-on-5 with 57%. Marcus Pettersson is the best defensive defenseman on this team, no matter who's healthy or who's injured, and he's been the best defenseman overall for the Penguins in the 2022-23 season.
He's been a huge help. He's been a huge step in the right direction for this defense, for this team, and for himself. I mean, this is like the first year we finally have Marcus Pettersson on this team, and we're not saying, so what kind of return are we getting for Pettersson this year?
Yeah.
The first year we're like, hey, we actually have to hold on to him for once because he's performing at a very good rate and playing very great hockey. I didn't give anyone an A+ because this team disappoints me, so I have to give him an A.
Yeah.
That's about it, though. I think there's definitely A's on this team. It just feels that an A+ at this junction of the season is not appropriate. That's just me, though.
I think when you talk about the trade speculation that Marcus Pettersson has had circling around his head since basically he signed that new deal with Jim Rutherford and the Pittsburgh Penguins, when you look at the decision by Ron Hextall this offseason to trade John Marino instead of Marcus Pettersson, it goes in the plus column for Ron Hextall, because as good as John Marino was with the New Jersey Devils before being injured, Marcus Pettersson, in my opinion, has been better. Now, I know he doesn't bring the offensive upside, but John Marino didn't bring too much offensive upside when he was with the Penguins either. So I think Pettersson is the better of the two defensemen. I know he's the more expensive of the two defensemen, but I think he's been the best defenseman for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I think that's one thing I'll commend Ron Hextall on right now, because overall, everybody's obviously down on Hextall's job, but I will say Marcus Pettersson, bringing him back and making sure to keep Pettersson on this lineup has been probably the best decision that Hextall's made, because he's the only guy on the left side that I would be comfortable at an extended period of time having him as the top defenseman.
Yeah, and that's why he's been there. And the fact that Pettersson has been able to kick that trade discussion to the curb, I think that just speaks volumes for his season.
100%. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and continue to give out Penguins mid-season grades. Come on back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. We're giving out our Penguins mid-season grades. It's hard to believe that we're already halfway through the 2022-2023 season. Hard to believe that it's 2023 in general, Horwat. But let's start out the second segment of Penguins mid-season grades with Pierre-Olivier Joseph, a player that we didn't expect to make the roster out of camp. He makes it, and then we say, okay, there might be a trade coming down the pike. It might be him coming down the pike, and maybe he's not going to be up for very long. Well, he's maintained with the Penguins the entire season, and at this moment in time, I feel like he is going to be a full-time NHLer for the rest of his career.
Yeah, I think his time coasting around the minors is over, finally. And he's earned his rightful spot on this blue line and in this defensive core. I know he was in trade discussions earlier in the year, but I don't think you do that anymore.
Mm-mm.
We have between him, Ty Smith, and if you really want to dig deep, Owen Pickering, there's a good youthful. I'm talking future of this defense, not the next year, not the year after. I'm talking the far down the line, final years of Chris Letang kind of defense. It's those three plus Letang and whoever else might be on the team at that point. That's a good little defensive core right there, especially considering how offense heavy the league has kind of been turning with blue liners. Ty Smith can fill the role there for your offense. Who knows what Letang is bringing to the table at that point. And now I'm getting into a much further discussion that we don't need to. Yeah. Anyway, P.O. Joseph, I'm giving a, what did I have here? An A? An A. Because he's just absolutely stood out as confidence, speed, and bringing so much more to the table than anybody would have expected this season, at least. I mean, I'm shocked he's still considered a rookie, but we'll take it. And yeah, I think just being one of the more consistent defenders, that confidence is visible, that speed is visible, and his play stands up to show it too.
P.O. Joseph has had his ups and downs this season. I mean, he looks exactly like a young defenseman trying to cut his teeth in this league, where he's made his mistakes. He's had his struggles. He's had his stretches where he gets beat and he just can't clear out the net front, which is still his biggest issue. And he has trailed off a bit as of late, but he's also playing a lot of time on the third defense pairing alongside Chad Ruhwedel, who that's a discussion for another day. Might be my Penguins to go tomorrow, but I feel like it's hard to grade him based on what you've seen recently. But if what you see with him when the Penguins have had more defensemen in the lineup, a better defense partner for him, whether that be Jan Ruda, whether that be Jeff Petrie at times he was playing with him, whether that even be with Chris Letang, even though that pairing didn't look fantastic. I think he's proven to be an asset for this team. I wouldn't say he's safe from trade speculation because he has a lot of value on the trade market is what I would imagine. And if the Penguins are going to make a move, it seems like they're going to have to get rid of a piece of value, especially to help their third their third offensive line. But I would still give him a B. You know, I think that there are levels to his game that we haven't seen yet. I think there's more that he has to give. But I think being able to play exceptionally well despite the circumstances is something that I take into consideration. And he hasn't proven that in the last couple of games, which has kind of disappointed me a little bit. I expected more from the pairing with him and Chad Ruhwedel. I would say Ruhwedel is more disappointing to me than Joseph on that pairing right now. But I did expect more from P.O. Joseph as a third pairing defenseman going up against the matchups that he's been facing in the past couple of weeks. So I give Joseph a B. And I think that there's still another layer and another level to his game because he's still a very young defenseman.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that can still be grown on with him. It's just a ton of fun watching him play, and he's at least standing out in a pretty humdrum defensive core, especially now with everyone hurt.
Yeah. Let's move over and talk about Casey DeSmith. Coin flip Casey. I give him a C+. And I think that's being generous.
It is because I had a C-.
Yeah. I understand he's not meant to be a starter. I get that. And what we're seeing of him right now is more than he's expected in his role and at his salary to be playing. But he needs to be a tad more consistent than this. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, coin flip Casey, he's earning his nickname now. And the other thing is, we saw him perform at the standard we all want to see him perform at last season. Let's not forget the way he was playing in game 1 against the New York Rangers and how he played to end that last regular season. He was much more consistent. He was much more steady. And I don't know what has happened. Obviously, goaltending is voodoo. It's never, something you can count on from year to year. It can be very volatile. But I've expected more from Casey DeSmith in this last couple of weeks with Tristan Jarry down, and he's kind of disappointed me. And it's been like that all season long. More negatives than positives for Casey DeSmith this year. So I'm going to give him a C+, and I feel like I'm being generous with that.
Yeah, C- over here. The 6-9-3 aren't good enough. I mean, you consider that you need to have a solid backup in a situation exactly like this where, hey, sometimes your goaltender's going to get hurt. He's going to go down with an injury. You don't want it to happen, but in this league, that just happens. Goalies are, I'm not going to say soft, but everyone gets hurt in this league. And also it's the Pittsburgh Penguins. Full health is a farce.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you need your backup goalie to be able to hold down the fort, and he hasn't really been able to do that. He needed Dustin Tokarski to come in and save him. And again, that may have just spoke volumes on how brutal the Canucks are right now, and oh boy, are they brutal. But in the same vein, you can't let that happen. You have to show that they are that bad before you need a backup goalie to come in, third string goalie to come in. You need your backup goalie to just hold down the fort. 693 is not good enough. 904 save percentage not good enough, and a 3.21 goals against average. I would love to see where that stacks up in the NHL. It's probably not great. But as the temporary starter, he's not good enough. He's about to, assuming he plays tomorrow, it'll be his 20th game of the season. And this little stat from Hockey Reference is so much fun. So far, he's gotten his 18 starts, actually. 8 of them have been quality starts. 8.
Yeah.
8. That's not good enough.
It's right about at half, which is, coin flip Casey. That's what you get.
Yeah.
Horwat, I don't have very much analysis on this one. Jeff Carter, what do you grade him?
D-.
Oh, that's nice of you.
That's nice of me. I know. It's because, you know what? We have to look at the positives of him, and there are probably some. He's a good veteran presence, good locker room guy, good, can lead the way for young players if need be, and can win faceoffs if tasked with that role. The only reason why I say D- and I try and look at the positives is because we're stuck with him. So you have to try and look at the positives, guys. You have to.
F for Jeff Carter. There's two F's in his name, and there's a third one I'm just going to give right to him. He's been one of the worst players. He's been the worst player. Yeah, let me rephrase that. He's been the worst player on the Pittsburgh Penguins all season long. Whiffed on a 2-on-1 last night that literally made it look like he's the old-timer at old-timers that started it all back in 1983. Like, it looks like the guy that people stay away from and say, okay, go ahead and shoot the puck, and then whiffs on it anyway. Like, that's what Jeff Carter was last night. In 41 games played, he has 7 goals and 19 points. 7 of them have been on the power play. Pens are moving him around to try to squeeze any good play out of him. There's literally nothing redeeming about him other than he can win faceoffs, and you can get that from a lot of players around the league. As a third-line center, he's not good enough. As a third-line winger, he's not good enough. As a fourth-line winger, he might be good enough, but we're never going to get to see that because the Penguins don't have enough talent right now, or at least they're not trying to show young talent enough to put somebody in that spot over Jeff Carter. So Jeff Carter is an F, and I'm going to hate watching him for the next year and a half.
Get used to it, buddy.
I know. But, let's get a little bit better than an F. Tristan Jarry.
Oh,
I have a C+.
Whoa.
I think the Penguins have gotten C+ goaltending all the way across the board. He's had incredible highs. 11-0-2 stretch at one point between November 17th and December 22nd, which was the Christmas break. 11-0-2, 935 save percentage, 208 goals allowed average. That is him at his peak. But we have also seen that when he is not on his peak, he might as well be at the bottom of the barrel right now because he has had some historically bad lows. Before that long stretch that I just mentioned, 0-3-2 with an 870 save percentage and a 4.8 goals allowed average. And he's struggling once again with injuries. That's the biggest thing for me. Not only did he deal with physical issues earlier in the season, whatever that was, which was during that 5-game stretch that I already mentioned, but now, of course, he's being injured with a non-contact injury in the Winter Classic, been out for about 2 weeks, might be back after about 3 weeks of an absence. I can't trust him to be healthy when the playoffs roll around. And I can trust him even less to be consistent and be the way that he was in November and December. So I don't know what I can believe with Tristan Jarry right now in a contract year as well. I just have no idea what to think about this goaltender because he can play like a Vezina guy some days and some stretches. It could be a month. We saw that. A month where he should be a Vezina caliber goaltender. But we've also seen him play like a replacement level NHL player. And I just have no idea what to feel about it. And the injuries play a part too. So I say C+.
Well then, that is a rough grading right there because
it's a rough evaluation.
That is, considering I look at his record and say he's 15-5-4. Now, I will say, it doesn't feel like he's 15-5-4,
Nope.
but he's only lost 5 times in regulation. That's pretty damn good, I think. Don't you think? I mean, it's not the same level as last season. Sure. What did he have last year in his total? In 58 games, 56 starts, 34, 18, and 6. I mean, 15-5-4 through 25 this year. I don't know. It's B plus to me. 918, 275. Yeah, the cold streaks aren't fun. Yeah, but they're not that long. The injuries definitely get in the way and are concerning. But this team's going nowhere if he's not in net.
Oh, I
Nowhere.
agree. I agree. But also when he's in net sometimes, you just don't know where he goes. I mean, he can turn into a pumpkin very quickly, which is something that makes me nervous. I mean, need I go back to that Islanders series? Like,
It's 2 years ago, and he's fought that one off. I would say
he has, but he does the same thing, though. That's my point, is like, he can be really good and then turn into a pumpkin and then be really good again. I just don't know when he's going to turn into a pumpkin, and that worries me.
I think you're just over worrying. I mean, because
Okay.
here's the thing about it. I'd rather have the 15-5-4 trend, throw that through a whole season, than be 6-9 and whatever.
Yeah.
Just I'm gonna weigh the options here and say Jari has vastly outplayed Casey DeSmith,
Yeah.
and Dustin Tokarski. While he's only played 2 games, you really can't give him a grading. I think Tokarski may have looked better than DeSmith in that one game. Regardless, I almost gave Jari an A. So for what it's worth, I guess B plus is me being harsh. So, there is that. I would like to see his shutout numbers get picked up a little more. Maybe actually do keep the puck out of the net, because it's hard to win games whenever you're still giving up damn near 3 goals a game. I'll give you that. You're right. He does give up a few too many here and there. But I think when he's fully healthy and fully going, you see it. He's playing with confidence this year. He's playing with a little bit of grit and sandpaper. He could be one of the best goalies in the league.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun year for him. It just sucks that he's getting hurt.
Yeah, it's hard to hold that against a goaltender, but I am. Like, that's where I'm at. And I love that you made the comparison. Yeah, this team's going nowhere without Tristan Jarry, because he's much better than Casey DeSmith. Well, yes, I would much rather eat, chocolate pudding than a piece of crap any day. And that's basically the same equation that you have with Tristan Jarry to Casey DeSmith as a starting goaltender. As a backup, Casey DeSmith is more like, expired chocolate pudding than a bag of crap. But let's finish this off with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. I'm going to lump them together because I gave them the same grade. I think they are both an A. The only reason I don't give them an A+ is because I've seen this team come unprepared for too many games this season. They've no-showed on too many games this season. They've fallen off at the end of the game too many times this season. And I know 2 players can only do so much, but when you're the leaders of this team and you have been for 18 years, you need to command that respect in the locker room, and you need to expect that much from your team night in and night out throughout the entirety of the game. So I hold that against them as much as it is against Mike Sullivan. I think the standard is set by them sometimes, but they need to make sure that it is set throughout the entire roster and not just with the top 6. I know it's hard to be in their control with that, but the no-shows and the inability to hold on to leads, I'm putting that in their court. Now, they're both over a point or at a point per game or over right now. I think they're both playing phenomenally, not to mention the fact that they're a little bit on the older side. But I think the leadership aspect goes against them where it doesn't go against many other people on this roster. This is why I have them in an A and not an A+.
I gave them both the same grade as well, except it was an A-. To everything you said, yeah, they're phenomenal players. We're seeing them step up in big ways. I just kind of pulled back from an A+ as well, because I couldn't give anyone on this team an A+, but I also couldn't give them an A for their own separate reasons. Sidney Crosby's because while he is at 52 points in 44 games, it's weird to say he's having a streaky season. He is. He had that whole stretch where it was, hey, he might be in the MVP conversation. And then it was, he hasn't scored a point in like 5 games. What exactly is going on here? And now he's back, obviously, but there's just been some streakiness there. He's the all-star. That's fine. He's going to still be Sid. He picks up his game again and continues his trend of 3-point nights. He had 3 assists last night. then you have that discussion again of possibly creeping into the MVP debate. But then again, Connor McDavid exists. And as for Malkin, it's harder to give him negatives, but there's just definitely been a few obvious ones. The defense has never been there. It's not there this season. There's a couple of good back checks he's had this year, but nothing to stand out and write home about. Other than that, just maybe just some of the decision-making on Malkin's part. The same issue it's always been.
Yeah.
We're proud of what he's done this year. He's looked at times like the best player on this team. And when he is playing fast and playing heavy, he's playing really well. And I think there was a couple shifts in the game against the Senators where he really showed that with Jason Zucker, that those two can fly around the ice. Those two can demand the game. And Malkin started the season off great. Like Sullivan said, he was just in his beast mode and was able to command hockey games. He hasn't been able to do that same sort of thing in the last few, so it slips a little. But I've been really happy with what I've seen from Malkin this year, and the same goes for Sid.
Yeah, when you look at those two players, nothing about their performances is really negative. I mean, yeah, you said Sid went 5 games without a point, which was the longest stretch basically of his career, which was unfortunate. But also when you look at the team around both of these guys, they've been tasked with being otherworldly, or else this team doesn't stay afloat.
Exactly.
Like, that's the thing. If it isn't for their performances, this team is in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, which, again, stop saying that. Stop saying that this team should be in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, because they shouldn't. Maybe if they didn't have Crosby, Malkin, and tremendous performances by Gensel and Jari throughout certain stretches this season. But I think when you look at these two, their performance, there's nothing you can really take from them. Malkin's defense is what it is. It's always been that way. I think he's actually been better this year than in a couple of recent years. Probably the best he's been since the back-to-back cup runs when it comes to the defensive side of the puck. But I think the leadership aspect of it, I think it's hard to get a lot out of this team, but I think they could be doing a little bit better as far as making sure this team is ready to play night in and night out. And that goes on Mike Sullivan as well. But I think Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin have been here long enough that falls on their shoulders too.
And for what it's worth, the NHL All-Star fan vote ends tonight, so we'll find out if any more Penguins made it.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I don't particularly take too much stock in the All-Star game. I don't think anybody does at this point.
No, but I greatly want to see one time in their career, because we do not know if it's ever going to happen. Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin play in the same All-Star game together. The fact that has never happened is shocking. Yeah,
that's true. And I'm sure the NHL would like to see that as well, because that's a nice narrative that they could play out that entire weekend.
It would be, but also Pittsburgh hasn't hosted an All-Star game since 1992, so
Yeah, well,
whatever.
Regardless, that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. We gave out our grades for most of the players. Maybe we'll grade the rest of them on an article, or maybe just on social media. We'll get back to you on that. But that is going to do it for this one. We will be back next week talking more about the Pittsburgh Penguins and hopefully about the return of some injured defensemen and maybe even the return of an injured goaltender. We'll have to wait and see, because there is no practice today, so we have no updates today. But that's going to do it for this one.
Watch out for roster moves.
We'll see you guys next time.